the sort of goal here, I think, is twofold. One was to try to reconnect mercy to the sort of religious roots. I've already kind of done a whole book about the secular roots. And that also was connected to a project that Jen Herbst and I have been doing over the summer with the Malta Criminal Justice Institute, where we were collaborating with a group of mostly Catholic businessmen who had been volunteering as part of their kind of religious observances in prisons, were appalled by what they had found there and wanted to kind of come up with a policy white paper that they could distribute and talk about with Connecticut legislators that would be based on, what kinds of changes we needed to make in our criminal justice system in Connecticut. And so working with them, again, realizing that there was so much potential in collaborating between the sort of prison reformers who are more from a secular tradition and the prison reformers who are from the religious traditions, cuts across kind of traditional Republican Democratic lines in really interesting ways, and was very fruitful, at least in that experience. So that was another reason to go. And I think, also just more significantly, I think watching the world kind of devolve into religious conflict and made me wonder whether there's some way to think about religion that doesn't result in kind of a war. So part of this paper is to try to allow religion to come into law in a way, or at least allow law to come into conversation with religion in a way that doesn't shut the conversation down or create just irresolvable conflict. So that is also, I think, a piece of this. Basically trying to show what humility in the context of one area of law might look like, and looking at it from the perspective of sentencing. So if it's true that we have imperfect knowledge of the past and the future, we don't know what someone's character is going to end up being after in the future, no matter how we think we know at least what's happening now. And of course, we also don't know everything about what happened in the past. We're always going to be perhaps mistaken about a witness, or not have a full picture of the historical presentation of a case. We should be humble in punishing, and so punishment should not be absolute, which in my view would get us out of capital punishment, life without parole, and permanent collateral restrictions. And this is connected to the second piece, which is punishment should be revisable, that we should have allowance for, while punishment is ongoing, to allow someone to challenge it. The third piece is that, when we try to punish with time in prison, this has a kind of eternalizing aspect to it. We almost assume that people are immortal, right? We give people 150, 200-year sentences. We adjust their sentences based on, like we would money. Like we treat time exactly like money. We treat it as how much loss, well, that makes this many months, or how many drugs, and that makes this many months. And so we don't have a sense for the finitude of humanity when we're talking about time in this kind of weird, reified way. And so trying to understand what punishment might look like as a finite, and as appropriate to human beings with actual lifespans, I think is a really important problem. I also think that we tend to treat time itself as the punishment. And of course, it's not. Time is the space in which human life has meaning. And in prior work, I've said that I think the most acute suffering is suffering for no reason. And when I talk to folks in prison, that's the sense that I get, that the people who are most apt to commit suicide, or most apt to be in despair, are the ones for whom their punishment has no meaning, either because it seems unfair or arbitrary, or because it seems so eternal, or because there's nothing that they feel like they can do within the four corners of their sentence and the four corners of their prison that allows their life to have any kind of renewed meaning. So I would like to propose that punishment have some kind of meaning, and meaning always for humans takes place in a trajectory, in a narrative from a past to a future. So this idea of time is very, very important in trying to provide a sense of meaning to a punishment. And again, because we are not sort of these discrete individuals, we ought to be thinking about punishment as repairing relationships. At the end of the paper, I try to sort of give examples of how a judge might speak differently at sentencing if they were doing this kind of sentencing as a sort of a loving, humble sentencing, as opposed to the sort of rule-oriented sentencing that we have. So I'll just read that, I guess, and I apologize for those of you who've already read it. But so here's how we do it now. The judge says something like, let's say that these are 3-year sentences. Based on the amount of drugs involved in your conspiracy as a whole, your base offense level is 24. And that's a +2 because you obstructed justice by leaving the country, and a -4 because you were a minimal participant. You also get a -3 for pleading guilty and accepting responsibility. You have waived your right to appeal the sentence, so that's a level 19, and it puts you at 30 to 37 months for a criminal history score of 1. I'm sentencing you to 36 months. And that's usually what you hear in a sentencing court, especially in the federal court under the federal sentencing guidelines. Now, what really that means, so if we were actually having the judge speak about what that really means to somebody in their human life, here's what I think it might sound like. I sentence you to 3 years. During this time, you will spend every holiday away from your loved ones, even as your children grow up and your parents die. It will be difficult for anyone to visit you because you will serve your sentence in a state 3,000 miles away from your home. I further sentence you to change your abode and your living partner every 6 weeks, and to adjust to a new authority figure every 8 weeks, in order to be sure that you form no solid expectations, routines, or new friendships until you've forgotten how to care and connect with others. I sentence you to spend these years without having any new experiences. I sentence you to have very little control over your body, or your health, or your food. I sentence you to see that those who love you gradually fade from your life until you have little to say to them, and they have little in common with you. I sentence you to miss the opportunity to rock your baby to sleep, to miss your daughter's graduation and your son's wedding. I sentence you to lose your career dreams and sense of mission in the world. Know that you will also probably not find a job when you get out. I sentence you to know that your children, parents, and friends are in pain without being able to help them. I sentence you to watch those around you go home while you remain. I sentence you to constantly adjust to living with people you don't like and who don't like you. I sentence you to a legal hell of hopes raised and dashed. I sentence you to emotional deprivation, repression, and boredom until you find yourself unable to feel and unable to choose. I sentence you to meaningless labor, to constant humiliation and disrespect, to tasteless and dangerous food and ugly surroundings, to extreme poverty of opportunities and possessions, to no control over the tangible productions of your creativity and imagination, to no peace, no quiet, no personal space, no privacy, to days and nights that are exactly the same for years, except for occasional random acts of violence and pervasive fear. I sentence you to form no relationships, to have no settled expectations, to form no projects for the future, and to make no sense of your life. So I think that's what we do now. We just don't say that. And here's what, and this was actually the hardest part for me to write, because I don't want it to sound totalitarian. So that's one of the things, so this next piece I'd really like to have your response. If somebody said this to you, how would you feel? James, you're sentenced to no more than 3 years, during which time I know that you will take responsibility for your criminal conduct. If you maintain your innocence, you will, of course, have access to the courts to challenge your conviction. You will also get the chance to talk to the sentencing judge once a month to report on your progress and let the judge know if you have concerns. If you complete the sentencing tasks early, you may be released early. The first thing is that we want you to have the chance to come to terms with your crime. We think that part of this exploration of the past should involve a confrontation with the real ways in which it hurt people. Perhaps maybe by working with religious groups or former offenders, or through conversations with people who've been hurt by crimes like yours. We'd like to know what you think would work best. An opportunity may be provided for you to make a confidential apology if your victim is willing to receive it. The goal of this first stage of the sentence is to understand the past, what the crime meant, what suffering and consequences it entailed, and how it is that you came to commit it, including figuring out what steps you might take in the future to avoid problems like these. There are a lot of people who've been through this before and who are now trying to lend a hand to help you through. They've helped each other think through and manage the circumstances that contributed to hurting other people, and you can talk with them about their experience. Depending on what you and your family and your support groups come up with, we can provide help with, for example, helping you get away from harmful addictions, getting you health care, and are getting you help talking through bad experiences or depression that may be holding you back, getting you into trouble, or making it easy for you to hurt others. Your children or your family will also be able to visit you, receive family therapy if they want to, and strengthen their ties with you, if that seems likely to be good for you and for them, through visitation and special programming. Then when you complete your assessment of the past, you'll have a choice of opportunities for meaningful community service as a way for you to express remorse, reconnect with others, demonstrate solidarity with your community, like firefighting, nurse assistant training, trail maintenance, service dog training, emergency assistance around the world. Again, the hope would be that you would be able to give back to the people you've hurt and to your community, that you'd forge new and sustaining relationships through that teamwork, that you'd be able to atone for your wrong, that you'd be able to feel proud of your service instead of shamed by your crime, and that you and those who you come to work with will be able to help each other maintain a stable, rich, and crime-free life after your return to the community. How much time you spend serving in this way should come in the form of a mediated or arbitrated settlement determined by you and your family and your victims and your judge, experienced ex-offenders and counselors, and by the nature and difficulty of the service itself. After completing intensive, meaningful, and supervised community service, you'll have the opportunity, if it seems to fit your situation, to spend time achieving a GED or associate's degree, or to receive vocational training or retraining in a field where there are job opportunities in your community. When you come back, we want you to have the skills that you need to support yourself and your family. We want you to contribute to your community. We want you to recompense your victim. We also want to make sure that you have work and goals that will make you strong and proud. During this period, you may spend some time transitioning back home so that you aren't overloaded with family and work responsibilities all at once. You may, for example, live for a while in a halfway house near your family where some of the burden of finding food and shelter and support is taken from you. That way you'll have time to find work, figure out healthcare, develop good support groups. After a successful transition, you'll be invited and expected, if your circumstances allow, to help mentor others who are also working toward atonement just as you were helped.